I believe we are live. Looks like the audio is working. Looks like the chat is working. Imagine that. Hello, everyone. Good to see you all. I think we're ready to go for tonight. Hey, Fisher. Hey, Bruno. Good to see y'all. We will start with the news here momentarily. Some fun stuff this week, news-wise. How are you all doing? I've had a nicely productive week, which always feels good. When you can get stuff done and you're not going completely crazy over it, right? That is how things should be, in my opinion. Don't go too crazy with this stuff. Let me just get the blazing lights out a little bit so it's not... You can see the halo, but it's not otherwise too crazy. So as I mentioned in the announcement video, got some news. I've got a review of Medieval Lives, which is something that, again, not anime, but I think interesting. I want to every so often do something a little unusual. And we'll talk about superheroes in anime, how Marvel and DC may have influenced anime over time. And I've got a fun little dramatic reading tonight. And then we'll do some otaku no cooking. I'm going to try making some scones. Some lovely scones using a new recipe. I have a recipe that you know how often you have these things that you do over and over again and you've kind of got it nailed down. Like it works. It's the way you want it to be. And then every so often you think, well, maybe it's worth trying something a little different. Like maybe there are better ways of doing it. I'm going to try that tonight and we'll see how it works out. Who knows? Alrighty. So let's start with the news. And we will kind of get right to it. Make sure we have our news stuff up here. I think we're all ready to go. Yep. Okay, let me pull in pull up my there we go. My news items so I know what I'm talking about. It's always nice to know what you're talking about. So welcome back to the anime news for the week ending February 23rd, 2018. Starting with some new anime on the horizon. Pastel Memories, which is a smartphone game, is getting a TV anime series coming soon. It is an otaku girls role-playing game, sort of a raising project concept where basically Akihabara is now in decline, it's in the near future, and these girls are trying to sort of take back Akihabara for various things and battle some virus. Looks very cute. Got a variety of cute anime girls in it. So here's something that turns out well. The game only came out in mid-October, so it's pretty recent, and hopefully it will do well. We'll find out. No more information. Don't know how long it is or anything else like that. But that is a new thing that is coming, so that's fun. Moving on to also announcement of another new anime coming out, Goblin Slayer, based on a series of light novels. And it will premiere this year, so sometime in 2018. We've already got, there's a drama CD adaptation, so we're going to have the same voice cast as in the drama CD. Yuichiro Umehara will play Goblin Slayer, Yui Ogura with a priestess and other things. Basic concept is that this young priestess has formed her first adventuring party, and things don't go as well as desired. But the person who comes to the rescue is this guy called the Goblin Slayer, who is just fanatically devoted to killing every goblin. And, kind of rather fanatical, if you will. So, curious to see how that's going to go. And we can actually find out a little bit more about that because we have a clip. Let's watch that. A teaser, rather. no idea what cowgirl means in this context. A little freaky, but yep, that is an anime coming this year. So here's hoping that turns out well. Also announced recently, but with some more interesting details, new anime adaptation of Banana Fish, a manga that came out in the 80s, I believe, and very well known, very, very famous, has a bit of a yaoi twist to it, but it's fundamentally a sort of an assassin drama from what I've looked at. I've not read it, but it is set in New York in the 1980s. The new adaptation they've announced is going to follow the exact same story. It's going to be a 2-core, so 24-episode anime series. It's going to adapt the entire story of the manga. The only big thing they're going to change is they're going to update it to present day instead of keeping it in 1980s New York. I'm assuming that's because it's just a lot harder to get 1980s New York accurate, especially if you're not from America, and you know, that's a lot of research about another country and another culture, you know, several decades prior. So it'll all be set in modern day, but otherwise it will be the story of Banana Fish. So cool to hear. Not sure when it's coming out. Don't have a premiere date just yet. Do know that the director will be Hiroko Utsumi, who directed Free, working at MAPPA, and Hiroshi Seko will be writing the scripts. He worked on Ajin, Mob Psycho 100, Inuyashiki Last Hero, other things. So interesting. We'll see where that goes. And we actually also have a clip of that, or at least a teaser. Looks interesting, doesn't it? So we'll see where that goes. Also, news about an existing anime getting some more material. Is It Wrong to Try to Pick Up Girls in a Dungeon is getting a season 2 and a movie. So that's pretty cool. We've got this this promo art here for the new season, and the film will have be an original story, so not adapting something from the existing stories. And the original story will be written by the original author of the concept. So good on them there. Excuse me. Based on a light novel series, by the way. So good to hear that. More anime of that coming. Again, no details about anything else. So we'll see. Finally, some award news. I generally don't cover award news too much, but some of the big ones are often worth talking about. The Tokyo Anime Award Festival happened recently, and they'd already announced a few of the winners. A few more have come out this week. In This Corner of the World, you see here, won the award for the Theatrical Animation Division. Kimono Friends won the TV Animation Division Award. And Yuri on Ice won the Anime Fan Award. Interestingly, this is the second year in a row that Yuri on Ice won the Anime Fan Award, despite not coming out in the period, but who knows. Also notable, Yuki Kajiura got an award for Best Sound / Performance. Good for that. So, congratulations to In This Corner of the World for winning the award. And that will do it for us for this week. Thank you for watching. Hope to see you here next week for more news. Alrighty. Yeah. Funny, Bruno. Yeah, not sure about the story for season 2. So they said the original story is going to be for the film. They did not clarify what the season 2 story will be. I assume the season 2 story will adapt more of the light novels, but the film will be original. And again, or to your point, I don't know if that's a good or a bad thing. Probably both, as is often the want. All right, so while folks are still filtering in, I have some treats for you tonight. I actually need to prepare for the dramatic reading And to do that, I'm going to show you a little something special. Some of you may be aware that the Korean animation studios in the 80s and 70s and 80s were trying to make original animation productions, but they didn't have a lot of pre-production staff, character designers, things like that. So they would liberate character designs and mecha designs from Japanese anime studios and use them in their own productions. I'm going to show you a clip from a Korean anime production called Defenders of Space, and we'll see if you recognize any of the material here. I'll be showing you some other clips in later weeks, but I just want to show you the first few minutes of this, and it's definitely interesting.
The city of Aurora will very soon be part of my kingdom.
Your Majesty, I have always been a loyal servant. I've proved myself before. Give me the job.
Your Majesty, I feel I'm the best qualified for the job.
You both have been loyal and faithful servants. General Saga, you will take Super Zarus. General Mike, you can be the one to take Super Scorpio. Of the two of you, he who performs most valiantly will marry my daughter Medusa and inherit my wealth and kingdom, Zebulus.
Long live your Majesty!
No audio, right? Sorry. Do that again. Sorry. We'll get back to that other clip later. We will return to the Korean thing in later times and weeks. But for now, dramatic reading. Dramatic reading. So, this is a dramatic reading of a post from 20 years ago when Princess Mononoke was going to be released by Disney in theaters. And one of the heads of Disney said this thing about how, because most Americans thought anime was just like all violent pornography, that but Princess Mononoke wasn't that. It wasn't anime. And boy, that got people really worked up. And this is what Kione had to say at the time. With the impending release of Princess Mononoke, anime has a chance to be appreciated and accepted by a wider audience. Then these uninformed experts impress rigid and false definitions of the genre on the mainstream. Maybe we should send a manifesto to the heads of all the major American film and animation studios, newspapers, and television stations. I'm half joking, but I'm so sick of these misleading articles. I can imagine mainstream America saying, "We love these new Japanese animations from Disney, but we will not tolerate that immoral, violent, pornographic, seizure-inducing eye candy called anime." If one of these so-called suits makes a similar statement on Entertainment Tonight, the genre of anime will be forever defined by the masses. Frightening thought, isn't it? Yeah, some people are crazy. Otaku no sound. That's good, Bruno. But yes, you will recognize multiple characters in Defenders in Space once we get to it. I had to mention the mecha designs. Definitely a transformer to start off with, and then a white base shows up. It's pretty crazy. A lot of stuff like that, where it's like, that's just what they did. And, you know, copyright law was different in Korea back then. So, what can you say? Speaking of, if you want to know more about this, where is it? China. Where was it? Pop Korea is a really useful book about Korean pop culture and how Korean pop culture has evolved over time. Music, I believe games, comic books, TV dramas, yeah, video games. Lots and lots of interesting stuff here. So if you want to dive into this topic, Pop Goes Korea is a really helpful topic on this subject. FYI. Hey, E39. Yeah, a lot of stuff. Yeah, that was a weird thing, Liquidus, is, you know, the name was, and it was like Kione Hibiki, or not Hibiki, Kione, whatever her last name is in the anime. So it was somebody clearly just copying the name of the anime character, which, you know, okay, but just kind of weird. Yeah, Korea likes to copy things. And it was seen as an homage to the original, right? Like, what do you do? Okay, let's move on to the review. Not really an anime review. But like I said, one of the new things with Geek Archaeology is I want to occasionally switch things around and do something a little bit non-anime, just as a change of pace. So if I do that, yep, that's good. Welcome. My brain farted. Let's try that again. Welcome. I am your geek archaeologist, and today I am reviewing Medieval Lives by Terry Jones. You might recognize the name Terry Jones. It may sound somewhat familiar. but maybe not from like history, more of like from comedy. That's right, it's that Terry Jones, the Monty Python member, who is also a noted medievalist. He did a BBC series called Medieval Lives, and this is the book accompanying it that kind of goes into more detail. And this is the thing about this book. It is basically intended to correct a lot of the misconceptions and misunderstandings people have about medieval life. People see it as this incredibly oppressive, dirty, smelly time where it was just miserable all the time. And the people at the time didn't seem to think that. They were actually pretty content with their lot in the way things were structured. And there's a lot of useful information in here about how things actually were. One of the more interesting things is this idea, and he goes to some length to explore the idea that the Middle Ages were kind of this trough of human civilization, that basically things were great in Roman times and then terrible in medieval times and backwards and all sorts of lost technology, and then we kind of got better in the Renaissance. But when you look at things at the historical record, actually things progressed from the Roman Empire to the Middle Ages. You know, some things were lost, but some things were improved. Many things were improved. And then when the Renaissance came along, when Renaissance thinkers kind of described the Middle Ages as bad and wrong in contrast to what they were suggesting for the Renaissance. So the medieval world became kind of a boogeyman in Renaissance times, far out of proportion to what it was actually like. And here's the thing. One of the things this does is it helps to really humanize a part of history a lot of us don't know much about. Or worse, we have misunderstandings about through popular culture. A lot of movies set in the Middle Ages have no idea what they're talking about, and they present it in this very, incorrect way. For example, they had plenty of ways of dyeing fabrics. They had plenty of colorful dyes. People did not wear drab colors all the time, especially if you were, say, a king or a queen, or even a lord. People, that con people generally wore bright colors because you could. It wasn't, that wasn't hard to do. Certain colors were expensive and hard to find, but in general, it wasn't this drab time. It also talks a lot about how things were done. So it is divided into, basically, let me see here, it's 8 chapters. Peasant, minstrel, outlaw, monk, philosopher, knight, damsel, and king. And again, each one is basically trying to attack one aspect of medieval culture. Peasant lives and how things actually got done. One of the things that always confused me is this whole idea of law and justice, and if something went wrong, if a crime was committed, what happened? Well, you find out here. There are no police, right? How does that work? Outlaw deals with that also in quite a bit of detail. Think, there are statues to Robin Hood, who was a criminal. How many statues can you think of that are erected to somebody who was, an outlaw? Kind of interesting. Monks were often incredibly wealthy, or at least their monasteries were. When you have all of these things, when society basically believes in certain tenets, like thou shalt not kill, but you also have a lot of knights who go off and kill people, this creates a problem. And one of the ways you solve that problem, if you're a knight, is that you spend a lot of money establishing a monastery who will pray for your soul and kind of absolve you of those sins that you committed in killing all those people off in the Holy Land. But of course, what you want to do is you want to find the least of the monks, the least of the monasteries you can find, and kind of raise it up. So monasteries were constantly getting these huge cash donations and using them. And of course, monks are people too. And some of them, became monks for less than completely pure reasons. Some of them were running away, or some of them, were just were looking for a change of life, or needed a change of life. And so a lot of them, twisted the rules a little bit and made it a little less difficult than the laws would have you believe. So, for example, one of the laws of Saint Benedict, I believe, was that monks should not eat meat unless they're in the infirmary, because if you're sick and recovering, you need some hearty protein. They could eat beans and other forms of protein, nuts and such, but only meat in the infirmary. So some monks moved into the infirmary and thus ate meat all the time, right? A lot of priests were married. Even though they weren't supposed to be, that was a thing that just people did anyway. It was considered one of those things, is kind of like a traffic violation, where it's like, okay, maybe technically I'm not supposed to do this, but I don't see, like, it's kind of church doctrine, but not necessarily biblical doctrine. That's kind of weird. So you get a lot about that, a lot about knights and what knights were actually supposed to do, and what they did during the rest of the time, right? Damsel also did stuff about how women were treated and their roles in society, and much of what you hear is not wrong in the main, but wrong in a lot of the details, right? About how women were treated and how women were and what they could or couldn't do in society. There's actually, women had, there are records of women having a lot more flexibility and a lot more power than the sort of common record, or the common assumption would be, where it's like, yes, there were these laws in place, but there are ways around them that women did use. So, and again, not to say that, oh, everything was great for women in the Middle Ages, but saying it's more complicated than that. And there was a lot more going on than you would come to believe. And then again, what's the role of the king? What does the king do? And why is he there? And what actually happens? So that is really, really helpful. And it's written by Terry Jones, and other people helped him with this. So it wasn't just, I'm sure he didn't write every single word. He had other people helping with research and so forth. But what's great about it is it comes with his sense of humor. This book is not meant, and it's one of the really nice things, is that he could have easily turned this into sort of a farcical, comedic look at history. Just, jokes all the time. He doesn't do that. This is a book about the time, but filtered through the mind of somebody who can present these things in a fun manner. So he has a really clever turn of phrase and a rather sarcastic look at things, which is very welcome, but still rooted in a tone that is practical and pragmatic and understandable, which is very, very helpful. So that is Medieval Lives. I believe it's only available in hardback. There might be paperback, but I only saw hardback when I went looking for it. It's not hugely expensive. I think it was in the range of $20 or so online. And so if you're interested in this, especially if you're interested in like fantasy gaming, fantasy tabletop gaming, and what life was like, this is really useful if you want to, say, write a fantasy novel, or write a story in a fantasy world, and you want to be able to answer certain questions about how society would have actually worked. Things that are often glossed over in fantasy stories. You won't necessarily copy medieval society exactly, but this can really help you structure it well. So that is Medieval Lives. Hope you found that useful. And if you have any questions about it, feel free to post it in the comments, and I will try to get to those. And until next time, I will have more reviews then, and I hope to see you then. We have a troll. So we have dealt with the troll for a while. Time out. All right, so that is that. I need to go refresh my drink, and then we can start on the great debate, which will be about superheroes in anime. Again, I just need a few minutes to do that, so I'll give you a little bit more of my history of anime panel, and I'll be right back with that. Oh, you guys mentioned the FMA, live action FMA dropped, the movie. Yes, that they did drop that out there, which I have opinions on. I haven't seen it yet, but I have opinions on that. But yeah, Liquidus, I'm curious to see what you think about it. So let me know in the comments or in the chat, and I will be back in just a few minutes.
Folks were working on animation in Japan. There were quite a few, I hesitate to call them studios because it was usually one person drawing. There was not a lot of money in early 20th century Japan to go towards frivolous things like animation. So despite the rapid technological progress, there just was not a lot of animation being made. There was no Warner Brothers studio that would just pay a studio of animators to sit and draw Bugs Bunny all day. So the animation you saw were usually very short films, often paid for by like a toothpaste manufacturer, and like one of the characters would, in the middle of it, brush their teeth, you know? So it was very simple, and also the stories were usually either modern domestic or fairy tales. The art style was also still mimicking the West. This would not look out of place in a Popeye cartoon of the era, or even a Fleischer cartoon of the era. A little different, but still very much in that tone and mode. If you'd asked Japanese animators at the time, they probably would have told you they were not trying to create a new medium of animation. They were trying to get the fundamentals of animation down. A lot of what they wrote about and talked about were simply, we're trying to, you know, understand the process and getting that nailed down before we try to invent new stories or whatever. So it was still very much that experimental phase. They were also hampered by this, the Great Kanto Earthquake of 1923. Until recently, all animation prior to 1923 was lost in the Great Kanto Earthquake. All gone. That's how destructive the Great Kanto Earthquake was. Has anyone here seen The Wind Rises? Hayao Miyazaki's most recent film. Cool. So you've seen the Great Kanto Earthquake that is in that film. It's why he put it in the film, because he was like, this is a big deal! Anyway. So that hampered things, started making more animation. And then this happened. December 7th, 1941, a date that will live in infamy. Japan attacked Pearl Harbor. Now, I didn't realize this before starting to research this panel some years ago, but Japan was involved in a lot of military conflicts before World War II. They invaded a lot of places. This is the Empire of Japan as of 1942. To be clear, that's modern Japan. Everything else they had conquered. Japan had invaded China and won, invaded Russia and won, invaded Korea and won. So they had these huge resources. And yes, so in other words, Japan entering World War II was not suicidal on their part. They had a very active military mission. See what?
It's debatable because
Well, yes. I mean,
the Army didn't know what was going to happen.
The Army and Navy were more or less against the war, but the brass and the government were like, we're doing it anyway, it'll be fine. Didn't work out that well. Anyway, there were some very important effects on the Japanese entertainment industry as a result of this. First was that you could not bring in Western entertainment into Japan anymore, right? They're the enemy, so no more Western entertainment. Think about this. This is the 1940s. This is the first full flowering of Hollywood, and those things into, you know, up until more or less that point, films were still growing out of a stage play that we put a camera at, right? Once you get to the late 30s and the early 40s, you start getting Casablanca and these classic films where suddenly film is becoming a full-scale medium. Japan wasn't seeing any of that, right? And that meant there were many fewer films just being shown in Japan. There was just much less entertainment for people to consume. Also, not only could you not import Japanese film, you could not Western film, you could not import Western film stock, the actual film on which you make films. And there were Japanese companies that were producing that, but you know, that's a very small pool from which to make films. So suddenly the number of films he made in Japan dropped. I believe it was in like 1933 or something, there were more films made in Japan than in the rest of the world combined. They were producing a huge amount of film up to that point, but suddenly it was just the bottom cloud of industry. There just wasn't a lot of entertainment being produced itself. Secondly, the Japanese government came out and announced all boys' stories must be explicitly pro-war in their message from now on. It could be a modern domestic comedy, it has to have a pro-war message. So the creators of these novels and manga had basically one of three things they could do. They could either refuse, in which case they went to jail, and that happened. They could go along with it, in which case after the war their reputation was kind of shot, because they were seen as, you know, just go along with this thing. Or they could drop out, just stop making new novels or manga. Ironically, those were the ones who kind of were best positioned after the war, because they didn't stop writing or drawing. They would just do that and put it in a desk drawer. And after the war, they bring these out and publish it. You've got some very interesting stories, because they weren't worried about publication at the point. And you started to get, it's one of the reasons why Japan produced a surprising amount of material dealing with the emotions and the trauma, if you will, of that war and losing the war, because there was all that material being written and drawn during it. The Japanese government still recognized the power of animation on kids, on the public. So they commissioned several animated films. First is called Momotaro's Sea Eagles. The other is Momotaro's Divine Sea Warriors. They're all different titles. This is the first full-length feature film made in Japan, animated feature film made in Japan. It is about a group of cute, cuddly animal Japanese people who go and fight the white devils. And I mean they are white people with devil horns. They are fighting. Who all immediately surrender, by the way, as soon as they show up. Oh no! They run off. It's hilarious. The problem is, this movie came out in 1945. The last year of the war. Who here has seen Grave of the Fireflies? Okay, everyone else watched Grave of the Fireflies. Yeah, but so you know what it was like in Japan in 1945. Like everyone saw this, we're like, no, that's just not how it's going to be. So this kind of died, and then of course, you know, the war ended, and we came in, and this was screened to like the American troops. Like, no, that's going away. You are not showing that again. To their credit, they actually they ordered public copies of the film burned, but they put a copy in the National Archives. They said, this is an important cultural film. We're just saying, not now. You know, bad thing. Yes.
Didn't they recently decide to re-release it?
Funimation released this film last year. Yes, on Blu-ray.
This is technically recognized as the earliest surviving anime.
Correct. And that brings up a really good point. I do not consider this anime because it is still very much, it is animated like a Disney film. It has the same kind of character designs. It is a musical. It has full character animation. None of the tropes and the elements that make anime a particular approach to the animation medium are there yet. We'll get to there in a little bit.
Ha! I remembered the audio this time. Microphone's back. Okay, live action FMA is in the middle. Fair enough. Wow, rush to the end of the story on the movie. Fair enough. Yeah, gotcha. So they kind of squashed a bunch of stuff into the movie. Fair enough. Huh. Yeah, it's always tough doing a live action adaptation of something, doing that in a way that is appropriate and proper and works for everyone involved, right? So I love to know what they thought were their expectations and their characters and who cares, and I'm sorry, but you know, who they thought their audience was, right? Maybe it's just for the general public in Japan. I don't know. All right, let us move over to the Great Debate. Welcome, I am your geek archaeologist, here to delve into a particular rather thorny topic about superheroes and their impact on Japanese anime. Particularly, I want to talk about classic Western superheroes: Superman, Batman, Fantastic Four, X-Men, those tropes, and why they are, or whether they have influenced anime significantly. Now, we can obviously look at shows like One Punch Man, which is set in a clearly superhero, Western Marvel or DC inspired universe, filtered through some anime tropes. But that's not really what I'm driving at here. It's certainly part of the puzzle. But what I really want to get into is whether superhero stories, superhero tropes, wove themselves into the fabric of anime itself. And to answer that, I think we need to kind of figure out, okay, what are the tropes of superheroes? You have very powerful main characters, central characters, who are powerful innately. Usually their powers are accidental, or their powers are not intentional, I'll put it that way. Either they were born with the powers, they just kind of came along for the ride, or they were bitten by a radioactive spider, what have you. And they use these powers for good. One of the things that's particularly different generally in how those stories are structured, in how stories of people with power are structured, certainly is that in the West, characters with power use that power in ways that are interesting or helpful for them, and from there end up helping society. So Tony Stark, makes the Iron Man suit to get out of prison, to get out of this problematic situation, and he has all these skills that he's developed separately from being a superhero, and then applies those to saving the world. Batman is born with wealth, but then this tragic thing happens, and he uses that to help the world. Over in anime, generally speaking, characters are called to save the world and then given powers in which to do so. So think of magical girls, classic example, where those girls, perhaps they were chosen for certain attributes, but they did not have those magic powers until they were chosen to save the world, and then they get to do it. Mecha pilots traditionally kind of stumble upon their mecha, and in a crisis which requires them to save other people, and they come to an appreciation of that over time. So that's certainly something that doesn't seem to have kind of seeped in to the stories of anime. I do wonder, though, how much the idea of a character with unique abilities is a factor, where you have these characters who are, let's be honest, very special, and they are the central characters, as opposed to, for example, a character who is put into a rough situation and has to become a hero. Doesn't necessarily have powers, in other words. So it's that question of how powers work into this, where, if I am a superhero, those powers make me a protagonist, whereas there's a lot of Japanese stories about characters who do not have powers, who are not special in any fundamental way, but who become the protagonists, become the heroes because of certain attributes of their character, certain personality quirks that cause them to decide to do these certain things. So Death Note's a great example, where he's not anyone special. It's just that his reaction to getting the Death Note then creates an interesting story. Right? So let's see here. Animation itself. So Jack Saba. That's a great point. That Miyazaki saw the old Fleischer Superman cartoons, which I've been showing clips of here and there on the stream, and he found that very, very influential. And actually, I know there were a lot of different Western animations that Miyazaki kind of was inspired by. But that's an interesting point. And it's certainly true that early Western animation, by early Western animation, I mean like Western animation of the 30s and 40s, made it over to Japan and were certainly influential on that first generation of Japanese animators in the kind of anime industry of the 60s and 70s and 80s, where they looked at the fluidity of that motion, the sense of weight, the sense of characters in a real world interacting that you got in those old Superman cartoons. It's very different from the generally more floaty animation style, where the characters they're there on a background, but clearly somebody drew that character, somebody else drew the background, they slapped them together. And you see that certainly in anime, where there's much more of a sense, in general, of characters in an environment, of characters interacting with each other physically, that you don't get as much of in Western animation. Spin to win, it's certainly true that superhero movies are popular in the West, but that's a recent trend. You know, that's something from the past decade or so. In terms of huge popularity, I don't think that's really influencing anime dramatically, other than with things like My Hero Academia. I think almost certainly was driven out of this surge in popularity of superheroes. And we also certainly know that, for example, in Rurouni Kenshin, several of the characters there are modeled after characters in the X-Men, because Watsuki just really loved the X-Men comics, and so duplicated some of that. And you see some of that X-Men influence in Kenshin, of being about a group of characters who are all on the outside of society, who are to a great extent feared by society, but who are still working to save society kind of in the background. That's certainly true. And it's certainly true, Spin to Win, that modern anime, or the modern Western animation, aren't really pulling much from superheroes either. But the thing is, I mean, superheroes have been around for a long time, a century now. So I'm not talking about superhero movies. I'm not talking about, Supergirl. I'm talking about Superman from the 30s, X-Men from the 80s. All those things that certainly would have made it over into Japan by the time of the anime that we all know and love, right? So I think that's, it feels like there certainly could be elements of that. Yeah, and certainly, as Sunil says, there's parody anime out there dealing with some of these tropes and these elements. But part of the complexity too is that, it's kind of odd, in the West, we're not really seeing superheroes outside of Marvel and DC, right? Paramount is not making their own superhero characters. They're making characters who have kind of superheroic elements in them. Jack Reacher is sort of a James Bond-ish character, and James Bond is, in movies at least, kind of a superheroic character, right? And we're getting some, over-the-top characters in certain fantasy and science fiction films. But we're not seeing, caped superheroes running around saving the world from titanic troubles. And I think that's really interesting, that it's kind of confined to those two studios making those movies. Which seems odd, because it seems to me like, if you can make Deadpool for relatively little money, why not do the same thing and kind of steal some of that thunder? And maybe that points to the fact that the superhero formula isn't something that duplicates easily, that resonates out into other mediums easily, right? That maybe superheroes are there in their own little world, and people love it, and people, they become popular, but they kind of don't spread. Those tropes don't spread beyond it. I think it's interesting that you have Watchmen, which is this brilliant sort of parody of and commentary on superheroes. It comes out into a film, and people watch it, and they kind of it finds something of an audience. but it's really a thing about comics for comic fans. It doesn't really appeal to the mainstream. It's not meant to appeal to the mainstream. It's not meant to appeal to somebody who's only read a few comics. So it can't break out in that way. Yeah, My Hero Academia, certainly. But again, I think My Hero Academia is more of a direct parody of those tropes. And yeah, like you say, Spin to Win, Japanese folks are always saying that Western stuff is super popular in Japan. And certainly, Western movies make way more money in Japan than Japanese movies do, like live-action movies. You know, a Marvel movie comes out in Japan, and it will make 10 times as much as a Japanese live-action movie. It's just, that is the way that is for some strange reason. But yeah, it's interesting. So what are some of those other tropes of superheroes? Sometimes it's solo, sometimes it's a team. There tends to be teams in superheroes. Even these sort of lone characters like Batman and Superman generally end up getting hangers-on and, you know, other characters doing things in their universes. So it's not just, you know, one character all the time. And certainly in Japanese media, it's almost never a solo character. It's almost always multiple characters all interacting, right? So Neil asks, do you think making a new superhero anime / manga with a classic traditional origin story would work without making it a parody of the superhero genre? It's a good question, and that gets down to this notion of postmodernism and the modern tendency towards sarcasm and biting humor, where there's this open question whether it is really possible to make something like that in any, you know, medium without making it a parody. Like, I don't know if you could tell a straight superhero origin story not unironically. I think people would just laugh at it. It's kind of interesting. I mean, I think people should. I think people should try, but it's odd. I mean, you see that even in Marvel movies, where there's often a wink, wink, nudge, nudge to the audience about how silly this all is, or about how unrealistic this all is. People, you know, rolling their eyes at things happening, and that is because this is kind of silly. It is all kind of silly, and as a society, we've generally lost our ability to just completely sink into a world and accept it as it is. Wouldn't say uncritically, but you know, if something's silly, we kind of have to acknowledge that it's silly. We kind of have to laugh at it. We can't just let it sit, let it be, which is weird. Game Escape, I think that you're absolutely right. Man of Steel tried to be completely unironic, and people hated it. They didn't like it at all. The Return of Superman movie from, what, 7-8 years ago, the earlier reboot of Superman, I think had the same problem. Where it just, you know, it was a Superman movie. Straight Superman movie, and everyone was like, you know. 1 second. Sorry. And, I mean, certainly superhero movies just, I mean, they're a thing. And I'm not saying you should love superhero stories. I'm not saying superhero stories are worth watching. I'm just saying that they are certainly influential. So you're right, Sunil. We have the upcoming Batman Ninja anime. And not that long ago, there was Batman Gotham Knights. I think Batman Gotham Knights, which was a series of short films, an anthology film about Batman, all done by different anime studios. And that was a fascinating look at Batman. I love a lot of those approaches to Batman and how he does things and why he does stuff. There's some really fascinating stuff. So here's a question. Is Super Sentai borrowing from superheroes? And Super Sentai obviously goes back decades and decades, but it definitely came out after Superman in the 30s. So that's a case where I would argue that superheroes influenced those live action things, and then we get things based off of Super Sentai like Sailor Moon, which is basically Magical Girl plus Super Sentai, you know, married together. So there's that aspect as well of, I think, those aspects, and you know, Super Sentai, including some of the other live action things, aren't necessarily Sentai per se. It's interesting to note how Super Sentai, you know, you have transformations, you have superpowers, but again, in that case, those characters are usually chosen by an outside entity and given powers to do things. So it's kind of a merge of the two. I think it is kind of Japanese story sensibilities, Japanese heroic sensibilities, added to a superhero concept, superhero story structure, if you will. So Liquidus says that one trope they get an influence from would be the drama struggles, like analyzing Batman's moral code for how he handles crime. I'm curious, where would you say that influences in anime? Because I would say that there is as much, you know, analysis of that in the West as there is in Japan, but I'm not deeply familiar with that on either side of the pond. I've seen a fair amount of Batman stuff, but not everything. Right, yeah, absolutely. Super Sentai is a very different thing than a Western superhero, in the sense that, you know, it's this group that is much more equal than a superhero group, right? Where, yes, there's the red, you know, the red team member who is technically the leader, and have kind of this drama back and forth. But I think, you know, in general, it's a much more flat organization than, you know, the X-Men or Justice League or things like that. Well, yeah, they're all technically equal, but they all have these very strong... That's an interesting thing, too, actually, when you think about it. You know, the Super Friends or the Justice League or what have you, they all have their specialties, whereas in Super Sentai, the characters generally aren't that differentiated. Maybe they have different weapons and, you know, different vehicles and so forth. But at the end of the day, you know, that vehicle versus that vehicle do basically the same thing in an episode, even though, you know, one's a tank and one's a Jeep, but there's not that much difference, you know, effectively, in terms of the plot. They don't really delve into that. So that's, I think, an interesting thing, too. But yeah, certainly Super Sentai are different. And so you see those woven into anime. So what else is interesting about, or unique about the superhero genre in the West? So superheroes are often detective stories, often mysteries, effectively. But that's a thing that kind of evolved in its own way in Japan, where this, you know, science fiction medium was basically founded from the detective genre, from the mystery genre. So I think that was kind of there to begin with. And then you've got, what else? You've got the Rogues Gallery, so they're often a wide variety of villains. I don't see that being a particular part of anime, really. I don't know what MHA is, the creator. Marvel Heroic Adventures? I don't know. Let's see here. The Wild Origin stories, I think that might be something that worked its way in. When you look at early Japanese science fiction and fantasy stories, they tend to be, you know, the main character, again, stumbles into a giant robot, or otherwise happens to be part of something, but, you know, you're not struck by lightning and given a power in anime. It doesn't come out... Oh, My Hero Academia, gotcha. Yeah, but like I was saying before, the creator, I think My Hero Academia is a... You know, it is a parody of superheroes. It is a direct, you know, commentary on. It's not really, you know, it's like us doing a parody of anime. That's not really anime influencing the medium. It's somebody deciding to take on that medium. But yeah, it's interesting. And you know, getting to that point, I think Dragon Ball Z is an interesting case where Goku is definitely more in the Superman mold than your average anime shonen protagonist. And, you know, it certainly seems to be based off that, and certainly Akira Toriyama is very familiar with Superman, you know, having had a direct Superman parody character in Dr. Slump, his earlier stuff. And that is a case where the characters in Dragon Ball Z are quite differentiated. They're all doing basically the same thing, but they're not all, involved in the same fights. The power levels are much more varied in Dragon Ball Z than they are in your average anime series. So I would argue Dragon Ball Z is certainly influenced by those stories more. So Game Escape, that's interesting. That superhero stories are basically wish fulfillment narratives about coping with social violence. That's a really good point. I think that definitely hits the nail on the head. And I think that's, it's not just social violence in the broader sense too. I think X-Men is very much about that idea that I am oppressed and I wish I could zap the person oppressing me. And that oppression can be, what any teenager goes through, right? It doesn't necessarily need to be, a social stigma. It can just be that I'm a geek or, I like this girl or whatever. And I think you're absolutely right. The superhero stories are about that wish fulfillment of striking back at people who are doing the wrong thing. But the thing is, in I would say Japan in particular, wish fulfillment is generally not about solving social justice issues. Social justice issues are things that will work work themselves out in society. Police will eventually capture the criminals. You don't really, you don't see a strong trend in Japanese culture towards ending crime, right? Because that is a group problem that the group has to solve, not the individual. Again, traditionally, but I think where Japanese culture took that and ran with it is the idea of growth. That you can start as a 12-year-old Bruce Wayne and become Batman later on in your life if you train hard enough, right? And certainly, Jack Sabah, you're certainly right that superhero influence. Superheroes came from their own places too. There are Zorro is definitely an early superhero, or a proto superhero, and you have other examples of that. You have the Mexican luchadores as their own sort of superhero character, which they took in their own direction, right? Certainly, you're right, Japanese animators. So that's an interesting point spin to win, how Japanese animators, I think, certainly are anime nerds. Often they're animation nerds more than they're anime nerds per se. They don't necessarily follow modern anime as it's coming out, but they're very aware of anime as an animation medium. And so I think there's a certain kind of incestuous loop there, where the same tropes tend to get recycled, and there's not a lot of external influence that gets sort of thrown into there. I think it's why when you see something like, I'm forgetting his name, but the guy who did Utena and Moaro Penguin Drum and Yurikuma Arashi, someone in chat will tell me who that is. He tends to do stuff that does have a lot of external influences, where he'll take a movie, Yurikuma Arashi uses a lot of specific visual imagery from this, I think, European 1970s film called Suspiria. And that's one of those things where when you see it, it seems very shocking because there's all these very strong images. Ikuhara, thank you. Kazuhiko Ikuhara. I kept thinking Inoue for some reason. And so I think that one of the reasons that people react so strongly to that stuff is because, oh my gosh, these are external influences being imported onto anime. Which is not the case in a lot of other mediums. Science fiction authors and fantasy authors are much more open, much more willing to do these, big, open, crazy stories with lots of weird influences. 100,000 Kingdoms is an interesting example where it's a fantasy story with anime influences. It's almost like Fushigi Yugi crossed with traditional fantasy Western fantasy concept, and that creates a very interesting, different story. And people reacted to that and said, "This is an interesting take," but they weren't shocked by it. The way people are shocked by weird things, right? And of course, Japan had a Golden Bat, which was a superhero during the 20s and 30s when they were doing all of their kamishibai, paper theater on the streets kind of stuff. So certainly there are, those stories. And yeah, I think tokusatsu heroes definitely had a significant influence on anime. I think that's certainly true. Because you see those influences in anime quite a bit. As I said, magical girls, I think, are certainly going there. That's you're thinking, and I may be wrong. I think Shonen Bat is the character from Paranoid Agent. Golden Bat is the one from the old days. Now, Shonen Bat carries a golden bat, but I believe he's called Shonen Bat in Paranoid Agent, whereas the original character is called Golden Bat. But I may be getting those switched up. And I believe it was a reference back in a little slugger. I believe that was a reference back to that character from the Golden Age. Or not the Golden Age, the age of Kamishibai, the very early days of modern Japanese storytelling. And of course, you have a very different culture, right? Japan did not face massive crime the way America did. Japan has never had a chaotic, violent crime problem the way America does. So I think that's one of the reasons why you don't see a strong superhero influence in anime, because there's not that social justice, that idea of social injustice to fight in your culture, right? Yeah, it's really interesting, and like I said, the Golden Bat character has shown up in different things, different references and callbacks in various anime over the years. But yeah, it was really weird seeing this. I remember the first time I saw this, Kamishibai, this guy standing next to a little poster of this character he's talking about, and it's this thing, and it's called Golden Bat, and I'm like, I know what that, is that a color? Oh, that's what that was. Imagine that. And you could also argue that, that idea of street performance theater works its way into Paranoid Agent. Then Paranoid Agent is about kind of memes. It's about the idea that stories spread and influence people. And that's kind of what Kamishibai was doing. It was people, a guy, riding a bicycle on, up to a group of kids, telling a story, and then they would all tell that story to each other and talk about that story. That became part of their culture, just by one guy telling a story. Yeah, little slugger. So yeah, Paranoid Agent is a very interesting thing, right? So yeah, I think that's an interesting point. So I think we've kind of come full circle on this very effectively, where I think superheroes were solving a problem for American culture that didn't need to be solved in Japanese culture as strongly, and so the tropes got worked in a little bit with things like, again, Goku being inspired by Superman, and other characters being, other stories kind of being inspired by that, and Tokusatsu bringing elements of superhero into them, but it's not kind of going there. In today's day and age, I would definitely, in any day and age, I'd prefer the 80s Superman. Because the 80s Superman isn't flawless, right? He's unsure of himself. Well, he doesn't always know if what he's doing will work. But he knows, he has a strong sense of what should be done and what he needs to do next. And so I find that interesting, as long as it's handled in a way that doesn't make him seem omnipotent and a deus ex machina, right? I think it's really interesting when a character has these strong opinions and has these strong things, and is faced with difficult choices around that. I've always found Batman a more interesting character than Superman, because Batman is frequently faced with problems that cannot be solved by punching somebody into orbit, right? Cannot be solved in the way that Superman can solve problems. And so Batman has to face different ways of dealing with things, right? Yeah, I don't know much about superheroes either, to be honest. But here's the problem to me, with characters who are, to me, certain types of characters are meant to be used in certain ways, right? In The Lord of the Rings, I would not have wanted Frodo and Sam to be completely sure and convinced that they would go to the fires of Mount Doom and, you know, throw the ring into the fire into Mount Doom and everything would be okay and they'd come back. You know, I wanted them to be troubled, uncertain characters who frequently struggled with the question of whether they were actually going to succeed. That works for that kind of a story. But for a superhero story, I want characters who are, again, not flawless, but characters who are firm of opinion and purpose. Because it's much more interesting to me when you can bounce those characters off each other. When you can have Green Arrow and Green Lantern have a conversation like, the law should be upheld. People should follow the law. What if the law is wrong? Right? Those are two, it's a law versus chaos questions. You know, you got lawful good and chaotic good, very much discussing things like that. And I think that's interesting. Rurouni Kenshin is my favorite shonen story because the characters are not all powerful, but they have very strong beliefs, very strong senses of what they should be doing, and not necessarily what other people should be doing, but how they believe in general people should behave. But those opinions differ, where they have different takes on that. And I think that is one of the strengths of that story, where I very much look up to Kenshin, and I look up to Sano in his own way, and I look up to Megumi in her own way, and I look up to, you know, all these different characters in all these different ways because they have, because while they are firm in their beliefs, those beliefs are interesting to look at and to analyze, right? From a storytelling perspective, a character like Batman is a little more interesting because you can more easily do more interesting stuff with Batman, right? It is easier to tell a complex moral story with Batman than with Superman. Whereas with Superman, there's only so much you can do with that character. As Stan Lee liked to joke, they had to invent kryptonite to create interesting stories for Superman, because as it is, he's kind of, you know, he's limited in his stories. Not a bad character, but just there's only so much you can do with that archetype. Jacksaba asks, is Tokusatsu still as popular as it was from the 60s to 80s? That's a good question. I don't know how popular they were in the 60s to 80s compared to today. I would argue they are somewhat less popular, but still very popular. I mean, when I went to Japan, there was still plenty of Tokusatsu stuff, you know, being advertised in various areas, and advertised to kids, and, you know, ads on TV, things like that. So I think that's definitely, you know, it's still a big thing. Maybe not the massive cultural force. I think that's just, you know, fragmentation of the market, where there's not that many people watching any one thing anymore to begin with. All right, thank you all very much for this discussion. As always, it was very interesting, very helpful, and we will see how that goes. So we will see how that goes next week when we tackle a completely different topic. So anyway, that will do it for that, and hope to see you guys for the next great debate. All right, that's the debate. YouTube tells me we detected copyrighted audio and video in your stream. I would love to know what it is, because I know that Korean anime is in the public domain. I absolutely know it is. And I know that my panel was mine. And that's all I've shown. So somebody's being overly zealous in the copyright world. Imagine that. How strange, right? All right. So I'm going to go ahead and move over and do otaku cooking. I'm going to make, as I mentioned, skins tonight. Skins. Oh, before I do that, I want to let you guys know. I think tomorrow is Kit Bash. I think, let me check my calendar. Yes, Kit Bash is tomorrow night. You're right. The new anime trailers. I try to keep them short, but they may have noticed some stuff in the trailers. That's a good point. That's probably it. I will expect that. We'll see. So if that's what's flagged, I'll go ahead and trim those out of the news. Do I think Utena is one of the best animes of the 90s? I don't know what best means. But, so actually Evan stopped by earlier today. He's going from here, he's actually traveling, so he couldn't stay here for the stream, unfortunately. He had to drive out to Atlanta. But he did drop off some stuff. We chatted for a while. He dropped off his Christmas present to me, which was incredibly generous. Get this. This, ladies and gentlemen, is a perfect grade Gundam. The Astray Perfect Frame. So the Astray Red Frame, sorry. So yes, that is kind of nuts. I've not gotten a chance to pop it open or anything. But there you go. So yes, Kit Bash will be extended for a few weeks. I've got obviously other kits to assemble as well. But yeah, that was very, very awesome of Evan. So yeah, he's still dealing with a bunch of other stuff with work and other like family obligations and so forth. So he unfortunately can't return to the live stream for a little while, but hopefully things will settle down at some point. Funimation acquired Ai Tenchi Moyo. Cool. Good on them. I liked Ai Tenchi Moyo. It wasn't great, but it was fun. It was a fun thing. It's not a limited exclusive. It's just expensive. You know, those things are, you know, $100 plus typically. He may have gotten a deal on it. I don't know, but they're huge. So it's one of those things that just very few people buy because they're very expensive. So yeah, he said it might be. Let me check. Some of them have LEDs. I'm not sure about this one. I'm not seeing any information about having light up LEDs, which is fine. I'm not asking for it. It's just some of them do, and this one I don't think does. But yes, I mean, to give you an idea, you know, I will be assembling this hilt of a sword. Like this whole scabbard is going to be a separately assembled thing. Which is nuts. Alrighty, so let me go ahead and switch over to over there. What I'm going to do is, and hopefully, again, I sometimes have problems with internet, but I'm going to switch to a cartoon here. Probably a Superman cartoon, I think. And, or no, it's going to be some other kind of thing. And then the stream will stop briefly and then restart. Basically, I just have to do that to restart it over on the laptop. So, be back in about 5 minutes or so with Otaku no Cooking, making these. So I'm trying to a different recipe for scoons over there in the kitchen. It should be a relatively quick process, throwing some ingredients together and seeing how it turns out. So, hope you join me there in about 5 minutes. Meanwhile, enjoy this.
Folks were working on animation in Japan.
Not that. This. 3 minutes. Okay, we are back online apparently over here. And we'll see how that goes. Let me just gotta check over here real quick. Stream is resumed. Good. Stream is continuing. Let me just double check over here. Make sure I'm seeing what I think I'm seeing. Shouldn't be that. One sec. It says it's continuing, so I'm willing to believe that that is correct. Oops. Yeah, pretty cool cartoon, wasn't it? All right, so we are doing some basic cooking here with scones. I've got, first off, let me figure out, oops, wrong thing. 425 degrees. So a fairly hot oven. Just getting that going. Recipe here calls for 2 cups or 10 ounces of all-purpose flour, general flour, tablespoon of baking powder, 3 tablespoons of sugar, half teaspoon salt, 4 tablespoons of butter, cubed, an egg. They're calling for a half cup of currants. I'm not going to put any fruit in. And then a cup of, in their case, heavy cream. I'm actually going to use buttermilk instead. It's 3/4 cup of, in this case, buttercream. Heavy cream would be better, but I just don't have heavy cream on hand. And buttermilk you can make out of powder. It's not as good as regular buttermilk, but it's fine in a pinch. All right, so let's go ahead and get this started. So basically what I'm going to do is, they just want me to, I'm just using a food processor. And then they're going to add that to the, interesting. I can do a food processor. Change your plans. Always helpful to change plans. You want to change plans. It's a little spotted, but that's fine. So what they want us to do is place the ingredients in the bowl of the mixer. So we'll start there. And I will do this all, I think, just this time. So we'll go with 2 cups of flour. Almost out of flour here, but I have some more. We want some sugar, and I think there's some baking powder, right? Is it baking powder? Yep, baking powder, salt over there. Yeah, we'll get everything else in there. Okay, so actually I'm going to put that on there so the flour doesn't spill, although it can still spill through there. So I'll just be more careful. So 2 cups of flour. Each. That's not enough. This is one reason why I like doing things by weight, because you don't have these problems. Oh, well, now I have kind of half a cup maybe in there. Yeah. And now I can kind of scoop it out of here, but then I'm kind of mixing the 2 flours, but oh well. There we go. Okay. Yep. Then we want a tablespoon of baking powder. Baking powder, not the same thing as baking soda, as I'm sure you all know by now. But worth mentioning. Tablespoon of powder. They keep flipping over, which is annoying. 3 tablespoons sugar. And again, getting low on the sugar. And I have another bag. 3 tablespoons? Yeah. Or actually, yeah, 3 tablespoons. They were saying you could add more if you want a sweeter. Losing a few bit off the side there. I'd be careful of that. But I'm going to go with the recipe. A little under it with the final. Actually, it doesn't matter, right? It's. You said you could add more sugar anyway, so I don't need to be too careful about measurements on the sugar because it won't matter that much. Half teaspoon salt. So basically, you know, a generous pinch. Actually, more than a generous pinch. Half teaspoon. In other words, not a huge amount, but enough to influence things. And then that, I believe, yeah, we're just going to put that on the this, plug it in, and then just pulse it a few times. Whoops. Yeah, obviously you have the thing in. Ah. That should be, well, yeah, that should be mixed. Now we're going to add the butter. So again, we want 5 tablespoons of butter. I believe I have here, how many tablespoons? 1, 2, 3, 4. Okay. So I've got 4 tablespoons here, and I'll add a tablespoon off at the end of this using a knife. Always be careful with the packages of your butter because the measurement isn't always evenly, you know, marked on there. It's maybe a little bit down, a little bit up. So you don't want to cut off more or less than you think just because that's where the marking is on the paper. There's extra butter down here. So I'm going to go ahead and cut a tablespoon off the end of that. And then they suggest to cut this into 1/4-inch cube pieces, which are pretty darn small. And I'm doing this here on the counter. That's not a big deal. The counter's clean. I'm going a little bit bigger than that. Whoa! But how if I actually held on to the knife? It's funny. Okay. And then we'll this. Cut. And then subdivide into smaller pieces. Again, just kind of doing this by look. Just get a sense of it. Because I'm fairly certain that this guy will be able to take care of anything I need to do in terms of mixing this all nice and completely. Now you don't want to, you know, turn this on and just start mixing and go forever, because that will mix a bunch of gluten into the recipe, and that will affect the resulting texture of it. It will kind of bind it all together in a bad way. So it'll sort of gum up the whole works. Then in there, and then we process that. Okay, yeah, I'm seeing no more large pieces of butter in there. It's been quite effectively mixed in. Then we will add, okay, 3/4 cup of buttercream. there's the, or buttermilk, rather buttermilk, out of the way. So to make buttermilk, I have a thing in here somewhere. So a cup of buttermilk is 4 tablespoons worth of water. Okay, so that's easy. So it's basically 1 tablespoon per quarter cup of water. So I'll go and grab this. I will get some nice, fresh, or not just fresh, filtered water. Give myself 3/4 of a cup of water. And then to that, I'm going to add tablespoons, right? Yeah, tablespoons. So where's my tablespoon? Right here. I will clean up, I will just get the dry bits out of that tablespoon. And I just need 3 of these into here. 3 tablespoons of the dry powder. Again, having real buttermilk would be better, but this is going to give it a better flavor overall than if I actually just use milk. Seems weird, but it's true. Probably need a spoon for this, not a fork. I did not think that through. Yeah. I'll just use a tablespoon. That was, yeah, I just had buttermilk powder on it, so I can use that. So this is not, I mean, the kind of buttermilk you want to drink, but in terms of as an ingredient, it's it adds a nice flavor to foods in a way that you're not going to get out of anything else. And again, cream would be ideal. I just don't have that at the moment. If I didn't have the buttermilk, I'd just use milk, the regular milk. It would just be, again, a little more flat. I'm going to add an egg to this. The egg's actually not necessary. The egg just gives it an extra sort of a cakey quality to it, which I happen to like. In general, again, I haven't made this recipe before, but I know what I like, and so I'm going to give that a try. All right, so we're almost there in terms of the dough. I'm just going to mix that in. I'm going to mix the dough a little bit, or I'm sorry, the egg mixture a bit, because I want that egg broken up before I put it in there. Otherwise, it's very easy for the dough to really not get incorporated well. So I'm just going to use the fork in this case, because those tines will do well to break up the egg. So I'm just mixing that until I start seeing some streaks of yellow, which means that the egg's been broken up. So they're saying, stir in the heavy cream with your rubber spatula about 30 seconds. In a large bowl. So we want to transfer this to a large bowl. We can do that. I mean, this is not a large bowl, but it's a decently sized bowl for what we're working with. Pour that in. And then again, we're just going to stir this until it comes together using a spatula. You could use a big spoon or whatever, but this should give us what we're looking for. One thing I'm curious about is how wet or quote-unquote dry this dough will be. I've seen scone recipes with very wet dough and some with very dry dough. This looks like it's going to be a drier dough. Very dry, in fact. Obviously not bone dry, but so I don't want large amounts of dry
stuff and large amounts of wet. I kind of want a combination, but I think that right there is pretty well brought together. I don't think I want to stir any more than that. Okay, so it's actually kind of a medium dough. It's sticky, rough, slightly sticky ball. Yeah, good. And then we're going to cut this and put it on the baking sheet. So, grab a baking sheet. Let's get some things out of the way. So we have some space to work with. And then we're going to take care of our dough. This is going to be interesting. I'm going to show you how I'm going to cut this out. And for convenience's sake, I'm going to add some parchment paper just so I don't get too much discoloration on my baking sheet. Okay. What I'm going to do here, move this out onto the parchment, and then I'm going to grab a blade. This is just a cutting blade. They say to make 8 for this. Now I know that's 4. These are going to stick to each other. That's okay. Give me a minute. And it's actually a little stickier than they said it would be, but not too ridiculous. You know, some of them are pretty sticky. So I'm just separating these into pieces as they're very wet, and this ended up being much larger than the others. So what I'll do is pull some off, put it on that one, make it even, a little bit more off, put it on that one. That seems about right, and we'll scrape some of this stuff off. Fill up that one a little bit, a little bigger, and actually I'm going to use okay, maybe some of this goop off my fingers. Use the scraper. So this didn't work out because the dough is much stickier than I expected. I will end up with some messy stuff on my sheet. So this stuff is gonna bake in weird ways. These little lines, right? They're gonna completely dry out. But I now have 8 scones, small scones. I might actually, now that I wash my hands, I'm gonna move this guy. He's into the middle. There we go. Get that off here. Okay. Move a few things away. My oven is not preheated yet, so I'm not in a big hurry at this juncture. Do I have any more sugar? Yeah, there's a bit more sugar in there. That's definitely empty. Let me just put some stuff away real quick. There we go. Okay. Oh, the butter too. Forgot the butter. All right. And these guys dish in the sink. All right, so what we got now is a sheet of scones. Once that has preheated, it should just be another minute or so. Those will go in for, they say, 12 to 15 minutes. Not too bad.
12 to 15 minutes, until the tops are light brown. Makes sense. And then cool in a wire rack for at least 10 minutes. That's actually important for scones. Scones and similar baked goods can fall apart if you eat them right out of the oven. They need a little time to cool and to solidify, if you will. You know, the sitting out on the counter and letting that heat escape isn't just letting the heat escape. There's still heat in there that's still finishing up the baking of the inside of the baked good. So leaving it out for a few minutes is actually completing the baking process, basically. Same thing is true of eggs, for example. If you're making scrambled eggs, if you move them from the pan to the plate when they're still a little not quite done yet, that's good because when they hit the plate, they'll stay on the plate for a little bit, and during that time, there's still heat inside. They'll finish cooking it. It actually needs a few moments on the plate to finish cooking. If you wait until they're completely set and done, put them on the plate, they'll actually be overdone and dry when you eat them. That depends on other factors. Yeah, I have not seen Manabi Straight or Futakoi Alternative. I have heard of Futakoi Alternative. I've not heard of Manabi Straight. Surprised how long the oven's taking. Usually done pretty quickly. You may be hearing some buzzing sounds in the background. Oh, resting, exactly. That is called resting. Well done, Mozo, and hi. The buzzing in the background is a 3D printer I have running right now, trying to print out a really big object. I think I might have a clog in the nozzle, though. So I may have to stop the print and replace the nozzle, which is unfortunate. Sometimes that happens. But yeah, that is resting. In fact, I can show you guys, show you all what this looks like. Oops. What did I just do? Okay. Actually, it might be okay. I might have overstated my case. That is 3D printing the bottom of a skull, which is pretty cool. You know what, I may have to... Nope, okay. It'll be a Hag's Lair for my D&D campaign, if it works out. Very long print, though. Like a 24-hour print. Just for the bottom of the skull. And then the skull will take probably another day and a half to print. Woo, if all goes well. Jealous of my 3D printing. Thank you. Hey, Spin to Win. I have not actually tried the Chromecast. I do not have one, so I cannot comment. I might. That's a good idea, though. I might grab one and just try it out around the house. I just have no experience. I have Kodi, which I use a lot. I have the Crunchyroll add-on on there, and a few others. Funimation has an add-on, so I can watch Crunchyroll and Funimation and such on that. And, through that, I can also access my I have some external hard drives which have all my anime on it, digitize all my anime. So I can plug into that and watch that on my Kodi, which is plugged into the big projector. So yeah, Kodi's and Raspberry Pis, that's kind of where I'm at. But that's a good idea. I might aim for that. Skulls and Scones. Be a good name for a D&D party. Maybe a Victoriana D&D party. Right. Yep, just Spin, Mozo, and me. And maybe Fisher. We'll see. Yeah, so what anime have you guys been watching this week? I actually haven't gotten a chance. I plan to watch more Laid Back Camp, but my Kodi kind of spazzed out on me a little bit. So it just couldn't play the file. And I could have just gone to the laptop, but I ended up doing other things. So hopefully actually tomorrow I'm planning on watching I'm hoping to finish, actually, Land of the Lustrous tomorrow. What should I do with Kodi? I don't do a lot now in the sense that I've set it up in a way that I'm very happy with, but I have all of my music. So basically my setup is I have a separate Raspberry Pi that has several external hard drives plugged into it, several terabytes each, and those have like all of my digitized video on it, my anime, and other things like that. And then I have a Raspberry Pi with Kodi on it, and it has those set up as a shared drive. So just as soon as it comes down on, it mounts those as a shared drive on the network, and it's all hardwired between those two, so it's a fast connection. Then I have those set up as just shortcuts on Kodi, so when I log in, I can just click on select anime, and it's all movies, TVs, OVAs. I just go in and I watch whatever I want. I also have all my music same way. So I have a folder called Music, literally, and I got all my MP3s and such in there. And Kodi does a good job. If you just point it to that folder, it will then read all that stuff, read all the tags, index it, and then I can just go to the interface there and go to albums or create playlists or whatever. And you can actually export iTunes playlists and use those in Kodi as long as the file path is the same. So basically, I have all my music on my laptop in a folder called Music, and same thing on the shared drive. So I literally can just copy a playlist, export a playlist from iTunes, and copy it over to, and it's a standard. That is not just an iTunes playlist format. It's the standard kind of playlist format used in Winamp and all the other things. Winamp, that's dating me. And so I export a playlist, just copy it over to Kodi, and I can play my music straight from the playlist. It sees where everything is. I generally tend to listen to either individual albums or a manually created playlist where I have gone in and said I like to listen to music by mood. So I have kind of light, happy, bouncy music, and kind of dark, quiet music, and instrumental stuff, and so forth and so on. I tend to listen to that more, and then I have a few playlists for like just anime or anime opening themes and things like that. That's the primary thing. Kodi's been unreliable for you. Yeah, I hear folks having that problem sometimes. Honestly, I don't update Kodi that much. I've probably, in the couple of years I've had that, I've upgraded it maybe once. Just because I'm kind of worried about that reliability problem. So, come on, Evan. That's worried. It's hot. Give another few minutes. I wonder. No? Make sure that I didn't have a timer on or a delay or something on there. I think it's just taking its sweet time. I definitely feel the heat now. So those are my main Kodi use cases. I also have a bunch of add-ons. So like I said, Crunchyroll, Funimation. What's the name of it? Not Rhino Home Video. Yeah. Shout Factory. Shout Factory has a plugin to their streaming service, and they have a lot of like fantasy movies from the 80s and cheesy stuff, and Mystery Science Theater 3000, and a lot of just fun, light entertainment that it's free. You just go and click on it and watch it. So I like that. And I have one or two add-ons for like CBS, NBC, ABC. So if I want to check out some recent shows, I can at least watch a recent episode of NCIS, for example. Somebody recommends something for me on that. I can do that. So there's Excel Saga. Interesting. Yeah, that's the problem. Yeah, I don't use repositories in Kodi. I have in the past, but not as a regular thing. I am not familiar with Sambo Master. What is Sambo Master? The Barefoot Gen. Yeah. Yeah, Barefoot Den is a movie to watch, to be aware of when you know what that movie is, and folks can be prepared for the fact that this is a movie about what it was like to live through Hiroshima and the bomb, the dropping of the bomb in Hiroshima. Like it is not a fun film. You will never forget the imagery that they throw you in that film. So, not a good date movie. I'll put it that way. Okay, I think something's up with my oven. I'm going to go ahead and put these in because I'm sure this is at temperature now. Yep. I have an internal, just thermometer that I place in there, and it says it's at temperature. So it said 12 minutes or more. So I'm going to set this for 12. At 12 to 15, so we'll check at 12. If I were really worried, I'd check it. Maybe I will check at 10. Because again, my oven's being a little weird, and it's my first time making it. I'll see what it's like at 10, and then I can always wait. But we're looking for that brown on the top. New wave pop rock band, relatively old in terms of their career. I know nothing about music, so I can't help that. Recently dropped Wolf's Rain. Wow, I have not heard of anyone dropping Wolf's Rain before. Not that there's anything wrong with that, it's just the first time I've heard of that. You enjoyed Excel Saga. I could not get into Excel Saga, I'll be honest. The humor just didn't work for me. I've considered producing something similar to the Epic Histories the Comic Book Girl 19 sometimes put out. I've thought about it. But that's basically, what you see is what I would produce. Like the stuff for the anime history panel, that's basically it, and I'm doing it with clips. What I would like to do is provide something whereby people can purchase access for $5 or something to a bunch of my produced videos about like history of anime, business of anime, all that stuff. Where if you want to dig into more of that, it would be a minimal fee, but just to get you access to those things, and then I get a bit of the money back to pay for more research and things like that. Enough to where it's not hard for anyone to spend the money on it, but where I see a little bit of return for my money. But I really want to produce a few more videos before I do that. Record some more videos. And have several hours worth of content that you're buying, not just 20 minutes. I want you to be basically buying a movie of this material. But I do plan to, so every week, as an interstitial, I'll show you another few minutes of that panel. And so if you just tune in every week, you will see that entire panel eventually. That is okay. I have seen Puni Puni Poemi. I love Puni Puni Poemi. That was hilarious. Because that was a more, directed parody, where I think Excel Saga, I don't know, just that brand of humor just doesn't work for me. Whereas Kadocha, for example, I think is hilarious. One of the funniest things I've ever seen in my life. And it's very over the top, but it's over the top in a... I think the problem is Kadocha is over the top, but it is set in the modern world with modern characters, real characters. Because Excel Saga is not really connected to reality in any reasonable way. You can't grab on... I couldn't grab onto the comedy very well in terms of why would this be funny, because I don't... that character is just going to revive, so it's not funny that she died. It's just... The laws of the universe kind of got into my brain a little bit, unfortunately. That's my fault. It's not theirs. Yeah, I love Poemi. Poemi was really, really funny. But really, I found the comedy to really, really work. Because it's dealing with specific tropes. But that's just me. These will need to go into a cooling rack, so let me grab one of those. I'll grab 2 just because it's a little easier to work with when you have some more space. So just 2 racks laid out over here. They could all fit on one, but then you're kind of crowding them around, and one of them falls off. And yeah, starting to smell something. Some comedy anime you really enjoy and recommend. Like I said, Kadocha, or Child's Toy, known as Kodomo no Omocha over in Japan, but Kadocha for fans. Again, funniest thing I've ever seen, I would say. Recently, Girls Last Tour. It's a weird comedy because it's this slice of life. Well, we talked about it before. But I certainly like the comedy in that one. Let me think. I can see it in my head. And the problem with comedy anime is so often the title doesn't really mean anything. Let me think. It's about a 12-year-old girl in a classroom. One second. One sec. I need to go to my list of anime. Pani Pony Dash. That's the problem. The name is similar. Pani Pony Dash. 12-year-old girl genius teaches a high school class, Japanese high school class. It's very goofy, very over the top. God is a cat that lives in one of the vending machines on the campus. One of those sorts of things. Very bizarre. Lucky Star, I really enjoyed, mainly because it is, again, sort of a grounded, real-world comedy, which I think that really works. Azumanga Daioh was kind of revelatory for me in the sense of seeing a story that could be a slice-of-life comedy, but that could make you feel for the characters, where you really cared for these characters and, done preheating, you wanted them to have good lives and to be happy after the end of the story in Azumanga Daioh. I really love that. The anime is a pretty straight rendition of the manga, which is, I would say, actually released in a single volume. So if you're thinking one way or the other, I'd recommend going with the manga because you can get through it faster than you can the anime series, and you're going to get the same content. And you'll laugh just as much. It's just one of those things where instead of spending 13 hours, watching the anime series, you could spend 4 and get through the manga, and you got this exact same experience. So, FYI, the anime is fun, and there's some extra stuff in the anime series. You have a few extra jokes here and there, but FYI. I have not seen Ninja Nonsense, but I've heard it recommended a lot. Kato the Last Answer. Cool. How do I do with rewatches? I do not rewatch anime. I have rewatched anime, particularly for when I did my anime club. I would watch a show before I would bring it there because I didn't want to have surprises. So I've certainly rewatched things a lot. But in terms of personally, I've rewatched the original Tenchi Muyo. I rewatched Lane a few times, but that was partly because I wanted to understand it better, and so I wanted to be able to pick out different things. I was studying that show when I was rewatching it. It wasn't just I'd rather see that again. Other than that, I can't think of anything I've ever rewatched just for pleasure, because there's so much other anime to watch, right? There's so many classics to go through, so much new stuff to go through. Can't do it. I did enjoy Best Student Council as a goofy comedy. I didn't get all the way through it because it's one of those shows where there was no box set that I'm aware of. The DVDs came out, and volume 4 is impossible to find. So I collected all the others, but 4 are sitting out there. So I got through the first 2 or 3 volumes. I think it's volume 3 that's impossible to find. It's fun over-the-top comedy, but with some interesting little dramatic plot lines in it. And so I thought it was a good balance of really silly comedy, some over-the-top characters, ridiculous character concepts, but also with just enough serious moments to significantly counterbalance that, right? Yeah, Ghost in the Shell is very rewatchable. Akira is rewatchable. I did rewatch Akira when the new dub came out. New dub, when it was redubbed. Not new anymore. Yeah, that would be a good one to rewatch. That's one I brought to the anime club. I was very happy to rewatch that. Boogie About Phantom, I've watched twice, although I think the second time was just to watch it with Evan so we could review it. But I generally don't. Now, I will rewatch episodes. So, Haruhi Suzumiya, I rewatched episodes 11 and 13, like the week they came out, several times, because I just loved those episodes. So, rarely, but if a show's airing and an episode comes out that I love, I'll rewatch that a few times. All right, 10 minutes have gone. I'm just going to glance at these. Yeah, they're just beginning to brown on the top, so we'll give them another 2 minutes. That's kind of the minimum they were recommending, and we'll see where they are at that point. I suspect they'll be done in 2 minutes, because we're getting some significant browning just on the little bits at the top, so 2 minutes should give us what we're looking for. You're welcome. A lot of good, fun comedy. Actually, now that I have my my thing up, I loved B Gotta HK, Yamada's first time, but that's kind of, and similarly, It's Not My Fault, I'm Unpopular. No, It's Your Guy's Fault, I'm Unpopular, Watamote. But those are both, very distinct, people love or hate those shows. What else, comedy-wise? Those are definitely the ones that leap to mind. And they're ones that have comedic elements, but aren't, aren't comedies. Grave of the Fireflies, of course. Fun comedy there. Here's a weird one. Handmaid May is a harem anime, which is just straight up a comedy. And there's some harem elements, but there's no real romance except between the main two characters. So kind of Love Hina-esque, although she definitely cares for him. But the ending has this very dramatic twist. And that's not a spoiler, it's just to say that the ending takes a dramatic... The final episode is basically entirely drama. There's really no comedy in it. It's all kind of the plot that they built up for the beginning of the show, executing on that and dramatic reveals and things along those lines. So just be aware that there's that kind of big tonal shift in the last episode. All right. Those 2 minutes. Yeah, I'm going to get a little bit longer. Again, we're getting browning on the very top bits. Let me just check what they said. Until the scone tops are light brown. Well, the little bits are, but not the actual tops themselves. So, give it another minute, maybe. Now, my nose is telling me they're done. So, I'm going to trust my nose. Follow your nose! It always knows! And let's get these out onto racks. They've definitely expanded. Whoa. There we go. So those are our scones. Again, we need to wait maybe 10 minutes for them to really be ready to go. But I'm quite confident that those are good. You can probably see there's some pretty dark brown bits here and there. That tells us if we went any further, these would probably start to burn. So this is probably about as far as we want to go. All right, right, guys, that is Otaku no Cooking. Thank you for joining me. Thank you, chat room. And I think that will do it for us for tonight. We're just rewatching Dragon Ball Super and JoJo. Yeah, new dub episodes. Yeah. I've done that before, too, where I've watched the fan sub and then gone back and watched the dub. Of, shorter things, occasional things. Not like every single episode, necessarily. But yeah, thank you all, and I will see you guys next week. Again, Kit Bash is tomorrow. More assembling model kits. I will not start on that one yet. I've got some smaller ones to get through. So we'll do those, and then video games on Sunday. Should be fun. And yeah, so thank you all, as always. See ya.